Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, or as I call it, the Swiss Bliss. This watch has initiated a resurgence for the Swiss mid-range market, where we mortals have a chance to acquire the allure of a Swiss watch feel. This watch comes in at around $700, which is a lot of money, but considering the components and build quality, I think the price is warranted. Let's initiate the review with some specs. It has a dial size of 40mm, with a thickness of only 10.9mm and a lug-to-lug of 39.5mm, which is a bit deceiving, but we'll come back to that a bit later. The movement is a modified ETA 2824-2 with an 80 hours of power reserve, which just sounds insane, but there is a few caveats. We will get back to that later as well. The glass is sapphire, and I believe it's sapphire in the back as well. It has a price tag of $700. The movement. The movement space is the ever so popular 2824-2 that is housed by many Swiss and German watches throughout time. They have modified the 2824 and dubbed it the Powermatic 80, which houses a lot of their watches like the Deluxe and Tissot Gentleman. It's been ever so popular because of its 80 hours of power reserve. The first thing they did was to change the beat rate from 4Hz to 3Hz, which gives you less of a sweep and will therefore be considered less of a premium watch. The second thing is there's no regulator in the watch, which might make it difficult to service the movement, and you might need to rely on an authorized Tissot watch dealer to get the parts to fix the watch and service the movement. Apparently they have laser-edged the regulating mechanism, which could give a more accurate time, but again the servicing might be a bit more difficult. I think for hardcore watch enthusiasts who likes to service and regulate their watches and who has built a relationship with their watchmaker might find this watch a bit cumbersome in that regard. The Nivagron balance spring is made up of titanium alloy, which should prevent magnetic fields from your phones and computers to interfere with the timekeeping, and therefore the time theoretically would be more precise, and less issues with the balance spring will occur. I have nothing to add here, that's just a positive. Casing. The overall case is polished beautifully and the great craftsmanship is evident. It's very reminiscent of a Rolex Oyster Quartz with its shape and design. There is no overly sharp edges, but I will say that the edges are finely defined, so you can feel a little bit of the sharpness. The machinery on the back and on the front is of high precision cuts, and the watches seem to have had a great quality control without any scratches or uneven parts. I love the lightly polished color of the steel and the vertical brushed pattern that is left after the polish. The frame of the dial is extended from the case, and the exact design is used to put in an exhibition case back on the back of the case. Not anything fancy, just a very clean utilitarian design touch. The crown has a different color scheme than the rest of the case. It's knurled and has a non-polished and matted finish with a signed crown with the T logo engraved. There is an exhibition case back to view the Powermatic 80, which has a signed rotor and an overall beautiful aesthetically looking movement, I would say so. This watch should be called the Baby Audemars Piguet Royal Oak because the dial design is heavily inspired by the Royal Oak, which is not a bad thing. The dial design feels quite rare and unique. In the beginning, I did not fancy the dial design at all, and honestly was a bit taken aback by the pattern, but having it in my hand and seeing the dial up close, it suddenly makes a lot more sense to me. Pretty much everything about it makes sense, and it's quite surprisingly extremely understated, which could also just be the color black, which for obvious reasons makes it classy and neutral, and the fact that it only has a date window also makes it super classy and understated. I love that the date window is encased in a metal frame, which is a design touch all date windows should adhere to. The rectangular shaped hands are delicate and fits the aesthetic of the overall utilitarian design perfectly. I think they complement the overall watch, but some people might find it a tad too sterile and unimaginative. But I do like the cleanliness of the dial. It's clean, sterile, minimalistic, but still interesting to me because it aligns with the industrial look. The lume alternates with the brushed hands, which gives some character to the overall clean watch. The applied hour markers also have a rectangular shape, with second markers also having the same theme design. They're pushing the Bauhaus industrial design, which I'm not mad at, but again, for some it could be considered a bit boring and too classical, if that's possible. Otherwise, it has minimal printing with the Tissot branding at the 12th and automatic at the 6th. The integrated bracelet design is unique and well integrated. I am surprised by the quality of the bracelet. I think they have done a great job with the finishing and has an overall fine polish to create a smooth edge alongside the bracelet. It has push pins to resize the bracelet. I probably personally would have wanted screws for the price you are paying for the watch, but that would have made the bracelet thicker, so I guess I do understand their reasoning for not using screwed-in pins. It does not have micro adjustments either, but it does have half links to get an easier and precise fit. I did see somebody talking about the PRX not having micro adjustments being a con, because you cannot change the size of the bracelet in case your wrist swells throughout the day, but then you need the tools on hand when your wrist swells throughout the day, which you don't have when you are out anyways, so I don't mind the bracelet not having micro adjustments. The bracelet displays beautiful light play action, and honestly it's actually some of the best I've seen on a watch. The light moves from one link to another, very defined and methodical, almost like a march with structure and a plan. I don't know whether this is something people care about, but I just wanted to mention it and showcase it for you. So the but in the title. It's referring purely to the size. My wrist size is 8 inches, so rarely watches are out of place on my wrist, especially quote-unquote bigger sized watches. The 40mm with the PRX wears fairly bigger because of the fixed end link that is not flexible, so the lug-to-lug almost reach 50mm, which gives the watch a bigger dimension than it truly is. I truly wish they would have made the watch dial 38mm so it would have worn like an actual 40mm, giving it more of a proportionate sizing. Another thing that the fixed end link causes of issues for me is that the watch does not hug the wrist fully. And honestly, this is probably what bothers me the most. I think I like my watches aligned with my wrist more. Yeah, almost like hugging my wrist. And honestly, I think some of these things can be a reason for people not buying it, which I think is reasonable reasons, and why this watch might not be a perfect watch for you. Here you can see a comparison with the Sharp 033, which has a dial size of 38mm, which is the neoclassical size and for me the preferred size. Small details like a sign crown and a sign clasp are always welcoming to a watch, which people appreciates. The frame date window should be a must for every date window out there. It's such a classical way of designing a date complication. Even though the watch represents an incredible value, it still costs $700, which is a lot of money for a watch. I think a purchase like that should be thought thoroughly through before making a purchase. For some of you, it might be your first biggest purchase and may be contemplating having the watch as an everyday carry. If you don't mind the size and the end link being rather fixed, I think it's one of the best values out there. The quality of the material, the quality control, the build quality, the uniqueness of the dial and case, the bracelet being one of a kind in its price range, and especially the movement, even though it might cause some issues down the road in terms of servicing the watch, I still think it's impressive with the 80 hours of power serve, and it has served me well. This watch gives you great bang for the buck, and you will not be disappointed with the value. There is not much more I want to add to this review. I do understand the reasoning for its immense popularity. It's an incredible watch, and the feeling of the European design language and Swiss shines through, which is incredible. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'm glad that you're still here with me to the end. Hope you're all doing well out there. Thank you.